Hey everybody, in this lesson we're going to talk a little bit about drum soloing. I got a question from a drummer named Tim Connolly, and he asked me, what do you do to improve your soloing and how often do you practice exercises like that? Now I thought that was a great question because us drummers always get wrapped up in all the technique and all the rudiments and all the little bells and whistles that we could throw into a drum solo to make it sound good, but we don't think about the musicality as much. It has always been my goal when I solo to not get wrapped up in the licks and get wrapped up in the patterns and whatnot. My goal was to always be able to kind of feel where the music was taking me and express what I'm feeling emotionally around the drums. For me, the top level of a drum solo are drum solos that, one, work over form, and two, have some kind of kicks that you have to accent with the band. Now, when I was a young drummer, I first heard this on Dave Weckl's Master Plan album. There was a tune called Festival de Ritmo, and that tune basically was a Latin beat and it had all kinds of cool horn blasts over soloing form. It was the coolest thing to me. I just couldn't stop listening to it. I listened to it over and over and over again. I even transcribed it and performed it in my senior recital in college because I was so fascinated by that tune and the way the solo moved over the kicks. I just needed to learn how to play like that and to find it. Unfortunately, a lot of teachers just never really gave me a clear explanation of how to develop that. So I was forced to kind of find my own way. Now, what I've come to understand with this way of soloing is not to worry so much, again, about the licks and the patterns that you're playing. What you really need to do is internalize the form and internalize the kicks. So I'm going to show you the way I practice this, and this is what I use to develop my drum solos. That way I'm not just, playing around the kit, blowing licks all over the place and not saying anything. It kind of holds me to something. It holds me to a higher standard of form and accountability in terms of playing around the drums. I have to be set up for the kick, I have to know what's coming, I have to be aware, and that does something to your soloing. That takes you to a different place, it takes the listener somewhere else. So here's how I go about developing this kind of soloing where you have a form and you have kicks. First thing I do is I learn the kicks. I learn what they're doing, either by writing them out or listening to it over and over again until I can memorize the pattern. In this case, it's a little more complicated. It's a longer form, so I'm going to go ahead and transcribe the kicks and you'll see them up above the exercises as I'm going through. So here's what I do first. We're just going to play through the form and accent the kicks. Check it out. The next phase, since we're only worrying about the kicks, I want to internalize the kicks and I want to internalize the form. So the way to do this is to take the chops and the licks and all that nonsense out of it. But I want to be able to fill it in with something. So I'm going to take it all the way back to basics, and in a very simple way, I'm going to run each rhythm against this form. That means I'm going to stick with one kind of note value, play through the entire form, and try to accent the kicks without losing the flow of that note value. So we're going to start with quarter notes. So all I'm going to do is play quarter notes and accent the kicks where they come in. Let's go ahead and see what that feels like. Now, sticking with the rhythm chart, I'm going to move up to eighth notes. I'm going to skip quarter note triplets for now, but that is something you can do. But I'm going to move right up to eighth notes. Same thing, filling all the eighth notes in. I'm not worrying so much about the sticking or where I'm moving around. If it feels good, I'll just move around. If not, I just stay on the snare drum. And I just try to feel where the kicks sit in with just playing straight eighth notes around the kit. Let's try that. Notice I'm keeping it very simple. So I'm doing this in a very simple way so I don't have to think so much about the phrasing in between. I'm just trying to feel and internalize those kicks. I'm not even being thoroughly musical. I'm just playing the rhythm, getting it square in my brain so I know what rhythms fit in relation to those horn blasts. Next, we're going to try this, but we're going to move up to eighth note triplets. So again, I'm going to fit the eighth note triplets in. Bear in mind that these kicks are based off of 16th notes, so the horn blasts really work in a 16th note count. So you have to figure out how to stop the triplets, feel the horn blasts in 16ths, then get back to triplets, which is tricky, but again, it helps develop that sense of separating the licks and the kicks from the rhythm that you're playing. So let's try it in eighth note triplets. Okay, now we're going to move into the comfort zone. I'm going to fill everything in with 16th notes. Now, once again, 16th notes are kind of the mother rhythm whenever you're playing in a straight eighth tempo like this. So 16th notes are going to feel very natural. I'm going to alternate them, keep them very simple. I'll move around a little bit, but basically I just want to keep the alternating 16th notes and find those kicks. That's going to be the simplest way of doing it, and it's going to really help you fill in that space in between all your horn blasts. Let's give it a shot. Now it gets a little hairy, because now what I'm going to do is try to fill in with 16th note triplets. Again, keep this simple. Don't start messing around with licks and stickings and trying to really substitute hands with feet here. Just try to feel the 16th note triplet rhythm in a very simple way and maintaining those horn blasts. Figure out the space. Figure out how the triplets fill in. Practice that over and over again so you have a sense of owning this rhythm over this form. Now, once again, we're going to do the same thing, but in 30-second notes. Now, I know most of you think 30-second notes are super fast, and they are at this speed. It's very, very difficult to start mixing around 30-second notes. So don't do that yet. Keep it very simple. In this instance, I'm just going to use an open double stroke roll. So I'm going to fill in rolls as my 30-second notes, and then I'm going to accent the phrases as they come out of the rolls. Just giving me a sense of how to fill the 30-second notes over the space. Okay, so now we've been through the abbreviated table of time and we've really gone through all the rhythms, fitting them inside of these horn blasts. So I would do that again and again and again to really, really get good at these rhythms. You also get a good respect for each of the rhythms. You don't just always try to play fast. Sometimes slower, like quarter notes or eighth notes, quarter note triplets, they feel nice. And it's nice to use them inside of your phrasing and not just figure everything has got to be frantic and fast. Now for the next thing, what I'm going to try to do is take away all the rhythms, not think about each rhythm, what I'm playing. I'm just going to phrase. I'm just going to mix everything any way that I want to, but I'm going to try to not play the horn kicks. So I'm going to do whatever I want to do just in the space in between all of these horn blasts, making sure that I stop before each of these horn blasts happen. It's very tricky, but it's a good way of just focusing on the space. Let's take a look what that sounds like. Now I have all the building blocks to perform a solo and have a little bit of freedom in terms of what to do. Now, of course, when you start adding sticking to this, it gets more complicated. So make sure you have a good handle on what stickings you're using. But eventually the goal is to not think. You don't want to think so much about the rhythms and the accents and the stickings that you're using. You just want to play and perform and do what feels good. If it feels exciting, make it a little faster rhythm. If you want it to be a little more subdued, bring it back. But the goal again is to not think, it's to just perform. So let's take all of this, put it together, and just solo over these kicks. I'll do a few rounds and just see what happens. Great. Now I really abbreviated this whole practice process here. I mean, this is something that I would do again and again and again and again at all the rhythms until I really felt comfortable. And then I would sit there and really practice trying to go through this and seeing what feels good, what sounds good, what stickings fit inside of what I'm trying to do. Record yourself, listen back, make sure that what you're playing makes sense and sounds good. It's not just something technical. And that's the way that I really go about putting together a drum solo like this, and this is how I practice it. Think about how easy it is just to play a random drum solo devoid of time and form. It just is a matter of just opening up. So hold yourself to a little bit of a higher standard when you're practicing, say up here, so when you perform, it's down here. And that's the general rule of practicing in general. Practice here, perform here. Never do it at the same level because then you start hearing all those mistakes when you're playing. So that's going to wrap up this lesson. I hope you guys got something out of it. And remember, check us out every week at the Drummer's Almanac blog. We put out a new lesson every Tuesday. So join us, comment, let us know what you think. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and stay in touch. I'd love your comments and I'd love to hear all your thoughts behind what you think makes a good drum solo. Put them in the comments and I'll see you next week.